Comment regarding the local building authority of American Fork budget for fiscal year ending 30 June of 2018. As is standard and has been for the past several years, we set aside $200 each year in a budget in the event that we need to notice the building authority for any reason, and that's the majority of our budget is $200. And at the end of the year, if it's not used, it goes back into the general fund. If anyone would like to make a comment about our $200 budget for the building authority, you may come to the microphone and make your comment at this time. Receiving no comments, we will close the public comment portion of the meeting, and we will begin at 6:45 p.m. with the building authority meeting. This is the special session at 6:45. We'll start with the roll call. Councilman Barnes. Councilman Bowen. Councilman Frost.
Here.
Councilman Shelton.
Aye.
Councilman Shorter.
Aye.
As the mayor is a member of the building authority, we have 4 out of 6 that constitute a quorum. We can't conduct the business of the building authority. First of all, review and action on the resolution adopting the local building authority of American Fork City budget for fiscal year ending 30 June of 2018. Is there a motion to approve the budget as presented?
So moved, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Frost. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilman Shelton. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the minutes reflect it was unanimous from all members that were present. Item 3 is approval of the May 9th, 2017 Building Authority minutes. Terry Lynn, have you had any indications of changes to the minutes? No. Has anyone reviewed the minutes and can make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Shelton. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Shorter. Hearing no others, I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We will stand adjourned on the building authority until such time as, with one hand, it's very hard to turn papers. We will reconvene the meeting at 6:50 p.m. for the budget item on the redevelopment agency. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 6:50 p.m. This is the American Fork City Public Hearing and Special Session. We are here at this hour to receive public comment regarding the American Fork Redevelopment Agency budget for fiscal year ending 30 June of 2018. In our work session earlier today, we had a presentation by Mr. Birmingham on what each of these redevelopment agencies entailed and what we could expect in the coming year. If anyone would like to make a comment regarding that item, you may come to the microphone at the best time and make your comments. Hearing no comments, we will close the public comment portion of the meeting, and we will start our RDA special session at 6:55. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 6:55 p.m. This is a special session of the American Fork Redevelopment Agency. We are here at this hour to conduct the business of the RDA. I'll begin by a roll call. Councilman Barnes. Here. Councilman Bowen. Councilman Frost. Here. Councilman Shelton. Here. Councilman Shorter.
Here.
Thank you. We have review and action. The next item, review and action on the resolution. Review and action on a resolution adopting the American Fork Redevelopment Agency budget for fiscal year ending June 30th of 2018. We met in work session. Mr. Birmingham went over these figures for us. I think we're all in agreement that this is where we expect to be the end of 2018. Is there a motion to approve the budget as presented?
Mayor, I'll move to approve the resolution adopting the American Fork Redevelopment Agency budget for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018.
Thank you for that motion, Councilman Shorter. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Frost. Any questions on this motion? Hearing none, I will call it for a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Let the record show that this was a unanimous vote for the members present. Item 3, adopt approval of the May 9th, 2017 Redevelopment Agency minutes. Terry Lynn has these in your packet. Have you had any comments to change any of these minutes, Terry Lynn? Is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Frost. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilman Shelton. Any questions on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Again, let the minutes reflect that it was unanimous vote. Item 4 is adjournment with the RDA board. We will stand adjourned until 7 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 7 p.m. We are gathered at this hour to receive public comment on the fiscal year ending 30 June of 2018 American Fork City budget. If anyone would like to make comments regarding our budget, you may come to the microphone, make those comments at this time. Receiving no comment, we will close the public comment portion of the meeting, and we will begin at 7:20 to receive public comment on the fiscal year ending 30 June of 2017 revised American Fork City budget. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 7:20 p.m. We are here at this hour to receive public comment on the fiscal year ending 30 June of 2017 revised American Fork City budget. If anyone would like to make a comment regarding the revising of the 2017 budget, you may come to the microphone, make those comments at this time. Receiving no comments, we will close the public comment portion of the meeting and we will commence p.m. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 7:30 p.m. This is a special session of the American Fork City Council. We have advertised our agenda as required by the state law, put it on the state's website, and we have posted it conspicuously throughout the community. We have 4 items on our agenda this evening. We'll follow that agenda as outlined. Before we begin, I have a couple of young men that are here for scouting purposes. We'd ask you to come forward. You can turn that microphone around so you can face the audience. Please tell us your name, your troop number, your rank, and who your scout leader is, please.
Okay, I'm Bruce Brewer. I'm from Troop 1123. My leader is Brent Zundell, and I am a Life Scout.
Thank you.
So, I'm Jared Brewer. I'm from Troop 1123, and I'm a Star, and my leader is Mike Wynn.
Thank you very much. We're happy to have you at a council meeting this evening. We know you've got some requirements to fulfill a merit badge. We wish you well. Inasmuch as you are moving along Scouting's trail, we ask you when that time comes for an Eagle Project, look around your neighborhood, look around your ward, look around your school, look around the community, and see if what there is that you can do that will make our community better because of your effort. We wish you well in your scouting progress. We congratulate you on the work that you've done. We wish you success in the future, and thank you for being with us this evening.
Mayor, if I may, I'd just like to note that at least one of those young men has already been through a citizenship in the community merit badge class with me, and will be coming in for passage of that merit badge. So he better take darn good notes tonight, because I know he's here and I know what the meeting is.
All right. Well, I guess Mr. Barnes has you in his crosshairs, so we'll see how it goes. Our action items tonight, action item number 1, review and action on a resolution adopting the American Fork City budget for fiscal year ending 30 June of 2018. I'd like to ask Kyle Meyer if he'd come to the podium at this time and make this presentation, answer any last minute questions the council may have regarding our budget.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to give you some highlights of the budget. And of course, I'd be happy to answer any questions, either as we go along or at the end. So the first one, the final budget shows a revenue increase of about 5.5%. Leading that increases sales tax revenue. We're projecting an additional $500,000 next year. And then also a property tax increase of about $236,000. It's important to note our property tax budget is independent of the certified tax rate that you'll be adopting tonight that I have a separate presentation on. Our collection rate has been higher than what the county.
The point to
is
note
showing.
here, this is not that we are raising people's property taxes, but we have more property now to tax, and that is where that 6.1% increase comes from.
Correct, Mayor, and also our collection rate has been fairly high. It's close to 98, 99%. We also are expecting licenses and permits to continue to increase. A lot of that's due to the strong building permit growth development within the city. And then also intergovernmental revenues, which the majority of those we receive from the state. We're expecting about a 29% increase in Class C road funds, which are being used for road projects. And then some of that 17% is showing from a VOCA grant that previously last year wasn't budgeted. It's been included in the budget this year, although that the VOCA grants are awarded on a every other year basis. So we already had those funds awarded to us. I have a separate presentation on the certified tax rate, but I did include it in here since that's an important component. Overall, the rate will be 0.002082. Last year's rate was 0.002261, so it's gone down. The reasoning for that is the actual valuation of property in American Fork has gone up. The revenue increase that we're seeing in the certified tax rate of $156,000 is strictly due to new growth, since the city isn't anticipating raising the rate.
So wait a second, Kyle, just to make sure I understand that right.
Yes,
People's effective tax rate went down,
correct.
even though we never lowered property taxes in American Fork. I'm
That-
joking with you. I'm just, people always say it always goes up, but in this case, if they actually look, the dollar amount is going down and the effective rate, it is going down.
Correct, yes. There's the breakout of the rate, as I said. There's a separate presentation we're going to do with the next item. Here's just a brief overview of what our revenue percentages are. So as you can see, sales tax and property tax make up almost half of our tax revenues, or excuse me, our total revenues. Other taxes 11%, intergovernmentals 5%, which you don't want that number to be too high because you don't want to be relying on other entities, specifically federal or state government, for revenues, because it's very easy for them to pull them back when they get into financial trouble. Here's just an overall graph by the type. So as you can see, taxes are 60% of our revenue in the general fund. Charges for services, a good example of that would be ambulance fees. There's of course other things going into that, is 17%. Intergovernmental 5%, as I said, licenses 5%. And once again, breaking the taxes down, as you can see, of our overall tax revenue, over half of it's coming from sales tax, a little over a quarter is property tax, and then there's some small other taxes. Moving now to the general fund expenditures. The overall expenditure increase in the budget is 4% from the 2017 beginning budget. The budget you're passing tonight does include the personnel increases that were proposed with the initial tentative budget that was voted to remove those. So those have actually been added back in. Of expenditures, personnel is 52% of the budget. The additional personnel added in the budget is the 3 police officers. The department request was 5, and 2 part-time water system operators, and the department had requested 1 full-time. As you're aware, it's much cheaper to have 2 part-time people who aren't earning state retirement benefits and the city's benefit package than 1 full-time. So it actually will save the city money, even though FTE-wise it's the same. We did have a number of staffing requests that we didn't fund this year. A few of them are a part-time to full-time HR assistant, library programming children's staff, and a parks maintenance operator. In addition, we are decreasing the FTEs 0.5%. There's a part-time accountant in administration that we will not be renewing in July. One important difference between the tentative budget and this one is we are proposing adding 1 full-time equivalent, which would be for a construction inspector, which would be funded through developer inspection fees. And I do know, based off of work session this afternoon, there were some questions on that fee. Just rest assured, we won't be adding that position if there isn't the corresponding revenue source to go with it. Because the funding that position is contingent on having this additional revenue source. Overall operating expenditures, which is what the employees need to use to do their jobs every day, is about 25% of the budget, and then transfers to other funds is 21% of the budget. So transfers to other funds would be things like making our debt service payments. We transfer money out into a fund to pay the debt service. We also do provide some money to the fitness center for their operations. The big one is capital projects and equipment, so that's funding the road projects, equipment purchases. And then a new fund, which is new with this budget, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, is a fleet capital and operations budget, which will house our fleet operating costs and then any fleet capital purchases. Some notable changes from the 17 budget on the expense side is dispatch expense is expected to go up 10%, so that's been budgeted. Our contract attorney has requested a $2,000 increase per month. We increased the transfer to capital projects and equipment by about $975,000. So that money really was to increase the amount that the city was dedicating towards roads and road projects. I always like to show decreases since that means we're spending less money. So our debt service went down about 30,000. We are anticipating starting phase 1 of a streetlight LED change out, which is 60,000. And then included in the 17 budget, but of course being carried forward for the full years, we did need to make some personnel salary adjustment due to the market for our building inspectors. And that was done in 17, but it wasn't a full year. So the full year adjustments are included in the new budget. Here's just a quick graph, a chart of the expenditures by type. So as you can see, personnel is 52% of our budget. And it's always important to remember, because you see that number and you think, yikes, that's more than half of our budget. You know, we are a service-oriented organization. We provide services to people. You know, people, when their house is on fire, they want the fire department to come take care of that. When they need the police department, they need police officers there. Same with public works. Unfortunately, a lot of the jobs we do have can't be automated, although I will say, of course, we can always be more efficient. I actually did an analysis at another position I worked at. Most cities' personnel budgets are running anywhere from 60 to 80%. So us being at 52% is actually fairly low compared with other cities. Just a quick overview of some of the other funds that we have. So the Downtown Redevelopment Fund, we aren't adding in additional money this year to do budget constraints. And then in the Park Fund, we put in a placeholder of anticipated revenue, since we don't know what park projects are going to be awarded this year. So that during the first quarter, after the park projects have been awarded, I'll be coming back with a budget amendment to show those awarded projects. Quickly, going through capital projects, we are planning on spending a little over $2.1 million for road and sidewalk projects, and that's a $950,000 increase from fiscal year 2017. We also included funding for the fire station 2, the engineering design costs of $175,000. Fitness center improvements totaling $96,000. $338,300 in park projects, which includes anticipated matching funds we'll need if we are awarded parks grants in fiscal year 18. Building security upgrades for $35,000, and then a required payment to UDOT for 200 East Main Street betterments of almost $141,000. The debt service and celebration fund, so debt services I had mentioned we're expecting to decrease $30,000. So it receives its money from other funds, the general fund being the majority of that. But as we learned during work session, the RDA also contributes money, and then also the enterprise funds, like the utility fund, also contribute money. The majority is coming from the general fund, though. The celebration fund, we did some adjustments just to make sure costs were more accurately reflected. I did just want to note, so fiscal year 17 and 18, we were anticipating using fund balance to cover the celebration fund, but we will, starting in fiscal year 19, need to start providing contributions from general fund sources at that time. In our utility funds, which are the water, sewer, and storm drain funds, we're planning sewer lining and storm drain projects of $250,000 and $500,000 respectively. A little over $2.2 million in water line replacements. And as we'd mentioned under personnel earlier, we are proposing to add 2 part-time water employees. We are expecting just moderate increases in growth due to population. We aren't proposing any rate increases in the water fund. And then the broadband fund, per state law, we do have to present a balanced budget for the broadband fund. In order for the budget to balance, I did budget in close to $148,000 of capital asset sales. An issue that's already been discussed in previous work meetings is we'll need to look at the broadband fund's viability and what the options are for that. As I had mentioned, we did create 2 new funds between the tentative budget and this final budget, and they're strictly related to tracking the operating costs for the city's fleet, and then also the capital funds that were needed to provide new vehicles. The revenue sources for that are the applicable departments. So we actually charge each department for their operating costs. Capital leases on the capital side, and then transfers also for capital. It allows the city to better track costs, and then it also will work in conjunction a fleet management plan that the city is currently working on. We are proposing 2 capital leases. The first one is $700,000 for a new fire engine, which was included in the tentative budget. We're also proposing another $120,000, which would fund future vehicle replacement once a fleet management plan is adopted. So that lease won't be executed until a plan has been approved, and we have identified vehicles to replace. It was included in the tentative budget, but the budget does include 6 new police vehicles. And then finally, you endured my presentation. Are there any questions about the fiscal year 18 budget?
Sorry. I'm just, feasibility study on the rec center. Derek, do you have any insight on that? Did Derek leave? Oh, there he is. We're looking to,
The goal is to look at our feasibility, our operations, and try to do some projections for the future so we can start planning. Do we need to upgrade, change? How are we doing on our efficiencies as far as can we improve our cost recovery and things like that? So it's a planning thing as well as evaluating how we're doing right now.
Had a couple questions. I know we had the fire station study that came back. I'm still anxiously waiting for the update that was provided. I don't think I ever received that. Is that possible to get soon? That'd be great. And then the new public works position / inspector position. I hate to judge people on other people's performance, but in the past we've been promised, hey, this isn't going to happen. We wouldn't do it. But then it did happen, and it came back and said, well, you approved it in the budget, so technically it was administrative action, so we went ahead and did that. So I want to trust people in their positions, and I just want to let you know that's a little PTSD that I suffer from a little bit. So I really want to take your word on that that's going to take place and happen, that it would come back and we'd have a meaningful discussion about those fees in that position, even though we may approve it inside the budget. I'm assuming, as I took a look at the attorney's contract and things of that nature, and I'm assuming that we would have an amendment to that contract that would be forthcoming for the increase in fee.
Yeah, that was a proposal, and
Okay.
and I spoke with Casey about putting that together and actually doing a formal contract on that, but that would come forth in July.
Okay, so we wouldn't be paying that increase until we had approved the amendment to the contract that would be
Well,
taking place.
And I'll let Casey talk to this as
Uh-huh.
well, but currently there's not, I sent you the contract that we
Uh-huh.
had that was from years ago.
Uh-huh.
And so we've been operating on good faith based on the old contract, but that was an hourly contract back at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And since that time, Hanson Wright has provided a monthly contract for us. And so what we really need is a new contract.
Okay. So just to clarify again, we won't see that increase until we get that monthly or whatever new contract it is be brought. What are you looking for specifically? I just looking at the terms of it, just double checking to see where we're at. So usually when we see some kind of an increase or a change or things of that nature, it's coming in some kind of a written format or a proposal and things of that nature. So there were just some items of discussion. I don't have a problem putting it in the budget, just trying to understand what's the process we're going to go through to have maybe some further discussions on those items. Okay. And then the last thing is, I think I heard right, you've put back in the 3% for the merit pay increase in the proposed budget that's in front of us tonight. This one, again, suffering a little bit from PTSD, so I apologize again up front. Went back and I've given this a lot of consideration and thought, and I wanted to just, if you guys can bear with me for just a couple minutes, I wanted to just read a couple things coming out of our council retreat from last year. I think it's very intuitive, because I think as we look at things, sometimes we have to take a step back and say, why did we go down this road? What were we trying to accomplish? And just a couple quotes from the February 11th, 2016 meeting on page 16 says, Councilman Frost stated at the retreat they found all the stickers on the employee morale came from the city council. You guys remember we put stickers on what we thought were important topics. And he stated that it was not all about money, that they needed to make sure that employees felt appreciated. And I think that's very telling because kind of looking back a year and a few months from now, I hope that employees still feel that, at least for me as myself as a council member, I still feel like it's very important to have employee appreciation and make sure that we have a way to have employees feel rewarded in their workforce. And I think that that was a very profound comment about having that all come from the city council. Then a couple paragraphs down, Councilman Shelton thought that the software was great to accomplish the objectives as we talked about, what software to use. As a leader, they need to figure out how they encourage improvement to get employees to the next step. Software was great to track it, but the biggest question they have was if they have the right people in the right seat on the bus that have the leadership skills to reach down and help employees get to that next level. And I really want to come back and say, July 1st isn't that far around the road, and these are goals we wanted to have done by July 1st. Now, understand circumstances change. You got to be able to change deadlines. But I would really love to hope that we come back to a system that really helps employees get the training and skills they need to step up to that next level. And that's really what I'm looking for here. And I don't want to make it feel like we're holding, or that I'm holding hostage the 3% merit pay increase. The reason for that is because so many times we get so busy and caught up that we forget the objective or goal that we're going towards. So I'm open to putting that 3% merit pay increase in there so long as I can get a strong commitment from others that we can actually get to that point, that we have a discussion in a consultative environment of how do we get the right system in place to help employees reach that next level. Because I think that's the key to our success, right? That will, anyway, I could go on forever on that, but those are just some of my thoughts as we take a look at the budget.
You know what? It's the biggest piece of our pie. We just, glad it's smaller than some cities, but it is the biggest piece. And but are you suggesting, Councilman Shelton, that we put it in there and that we execute it starting this next budget season, starting on July 1? Are you suggesting something different?
I am. I did some self-reflecting and looking back on it, and knowing that I use that term PTSD, and judging people on other people's performance is a tough thing to do, but yet I have to have that ability inside to say, I feel good with this. You know what I mean? I think I'm putting out there, and I hope it's okay to say I have some issues there. I don't have that confidence. I'm hoping that I can be proved wrong. So I'm willing to put it in so long as I can get a strong promise and commitment that we can put some timelines in place to have a discussion, to really have a system in place. It's not just a check off the box. It's a system that we feel we can have complete confidence that it's going to help meet the objectives of reaching down and helping that employee get to that next level. And that's through the whole organization. So that helped answer your question, Brad.
Yes, no, I'm supportive of that. I think we could always think how we can do things better. I feel like, again, as I hear you say, maybe just a good verbal commitment, and I'd be supportive of that. I do think that I'd like to see the raises, take effect on the day of this new budget. And I guess you're saying the same thing, with a commitment, maybe coming back into a work session, and it doesn't have to be a real rigid agenda. It's just a good discussion on it. If does that satisfy what you want to do?
Yeah, and there's some great content here in this February 11th meetings. I went back and re-looked at it, some ideas and suggestions we have. I think this last year we learned a lot. It was a tough year to go through, and the cost in the budget on the employee compensation side was an interesting one to deal with. But I hope that as we talk about having the right seat on the bus and getting people to reach down and pull them up, we can reflect on what took place this last year and make sure we apply in the system going forward to correct any gaps or pitfalls that may exist, and that we can have an honest discussion as a leadership team to come up with a really cohesive policy. And that's going to require us to rely upon our professionals who we have being administrative and HR to come together, and legal, to see what we can do to improve that.
And I'm also for the budget increase, but for the payroll, but I want to have it reviewed. I don't want them automatic. I want them carefully looked at before we just grant what we put in the budget. I want them to be relooked at again. So
Is that on the compression study?
just a review of it.
No, I didn't see mention of the compression study in that. Has it been?
Both the merit and the compression study are currently in the budget.
So I'm going to say how I feel. I feel like that that with I'm separating them out of two things. One being that 3%, the other one being the compression study. And I think that I'm more comfortable. I have some serious questions with the compression study, and I would like to leave that in the discretion of the mayor and our city administrator on how to distribute, how and when on the compression study. I'm just not comfortable with it, and I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I feel the same way. 3% is fine, but the compression study, I'd like to have it reviewed. So.
Is there a way to have that brought to us as a council to look at? I feel like it's hard if we give an employee, talk about morale, say, we're going to give you this pay increase, and then we're going to pull it back. Now, I understand if we say, hey, maybe there's some new information that came to light, but I think it would be serious enough to have a discussion as a council to understand what those pitfalls were, again, to help educate us that we're not going to make those same mistakes going forward. And I would hope that whatever measuring stick we use, it is applied equally across all departments, as equally as you possibly can. I think the mayor's comment last session we had was very important about certain employee and an individual being taken advantage of for a long period of time. And I had to do some self-reflection, and I had to think to myself, part of that was under my term as a council member, and how did I allow that to take place? And to be quite honest with you, it's because I didn't probably ask the right questions. I didn't dig deep enough. And so I think for me to come to that level of comfort, I need to have a better understanding of how that stick's being measured. And I think that trust is going to be built up over time. We've got a lot of new people and new positions, and hopefully that trust can be built up over time. But at this point, I just have to feel like I get to that level of understanding.
Is that, I'm just trying to think this through myself, okay? So I'm going off Councilman Shorter. 3% being starting on July 1 in the budget. The compression study, having some further discussion as a council on that compression study, the concerns that we have, the processes, things like that, whatever it might be, and then lay it into the hands of our administrator to actually execute that. Is that something we could? You're acceptable with? You're acceptable with? I guess I'm just trying to find where we're at, because I do think it's going to cause us to modify the motion a little bit when we go to pass this budget in the way that we administer the compression study.
Yeah, and I think if we take a look at it, I would like to put some timelines on it, so we know where we're going to stand and where these discussions are going to be at. I think that also gives a good degree of confidence to employees that if we are going to relook at it, it's not going to be 3 months down the road or 6 months down the road. They'll feel like they have some kind of finality of when a decision is going to be made. So I would like to propose and open for discussion, seeing if we can't have that on a work session for discussion about the compression study, the concerns, and maybe some examples of where those concerns are coming from, and have that done in July. I don't know, is that something, David, that is doable, or is that too quick of a timeline?
It'll take some time to go through most of those, but I think it can be done in July, probably by the second meeting in July.
So if we just said by our,
I'm just,
have
I'm going to remind Councilman Shelton that July's a big month for him.
I'd like to move it maybe to the 1st of August, first week in August or something. And then, like I said, I'm hoping that most of the compression study is going to be fine. Just to make sure that if there are any questions, that we look at those more closely. Because I'm hoping a majority of them are going to work just fine.
And so as let's just say we come to a comfort level in that, we understand it, perhaps we want to make changes to that, or we understand it, are we going to, at that point, need to put this back on for an action item to actually distribute those funds, or can we say, based upon this discussion that we're going to have in maybe the first work session in August, that we can, at that point, let the mayor and our city administrator execute those funds in a manner, in a direction that we give to them.
and I don't want to, I want to get to a point where hopefully we don't have to make a motion, where we can get to where we can have that confidence of trust in each other as a leadership group. But I would love to have that respect, that it would come back to us. We can have a good discussion and get to a general consensus of understanding. And I don't see a need for an action item on it, but just my 2 cents. And as far as the July thing goes, I would totally agree, probably push to August, because someone scheduled a kickball tournament during the same time we have a council meeting. And so I don't know what kind of planning took place on that, but
I think I just probably ought to enter the conversation. Just one comment, and it's been said, but I want to make sure everybody understands it. It's, quote, 3% merit increase. In my mind, that does not mean everybody's going to get 3%. Now, you just said something different. 3% is the max? Or is it 3% overall, so somebody could get 3.5 and somebody else? So if two people making the exact same salary, one gets 3.5 and one gets 2.5, that's a 3% increase in our overall budget of those two people. So is it a maximum of 3% per person?
That's the way I understand that the council wanted that administered, is it's 3% is the top end of the performance or the merit increase. 3% would be the maximum. Now, if you want to do an average, that's fine as well.
I don't know what I don't remember a discussion. I just wanted to make sure.
We would take that 3%, and that was the 3% overall. So
Overall.
let's say it's 100,000 in the wage line item. You'd take 3,000, and you'd have 3,000 to divvy up amongst the department. And so some may be at. So it's more about the dollar amount, I think, being allocated than it was each individual percentage. Now, I think that's a discussion for us to have as we talk about the evaluations and things going forward. And hopefully put a policy in place that's actually written out, so then we all are on the same page and understand what's going to be done.
What's been the communication to staff at this point, David? Do you know?
We haven't been that specific. We've had it, the number 3% in the budget, but we haven't communicated specifically how that was going to be.
So based on what you said, 3% would be the maximum. But the only way that would happen would be if everybody got 3%.
Right.
So in reality, if I'm understanding that correctly, the real thing, in using Councilman Sheldon's example, the real expense wouldn't be 3,000, it'd be 2,900 and something or whatever.
If someone received less than that, yeah.
Because in my mind, there's no reason to call it a merit raise and then give everybody 3% across the board. We
That's
used to
right.
call those cost of living adjustments,
Yeah.
not merit. And
These would be
in
based
my
on-
world, words have meaning. And so I'm just trying to make sure what we're talking about.
100% based on performance. So that's what the merit would be, is based on performance.
And then hopefully
I-
on the performance, it also includes that, again, we don't end up 10 years from now with a giant mess again, because either they're getting on the bus and riding along with us, or we help fix them and help them stay on the bus, or we kick them off the bus. Because the problem is the bus gets down the road and that looks like crap, because you got, I guess I can use the word crap. Anyway, it gets down the road and you have somebody getting $3,000 raise for the whole department, and somebody gets all of it. No one else, and the other ones don't get any. It doesn't make any sense.
That's right.
So I just want to make sure that we're working on it, making them better employees and trying to make sure it's as equal as we possibly can,
That's right.
while still encouraging people to work hard. So
Perform.
And I think that's, so maybe if we can put an August timeline, by the end of August, have the compression study resolved, hopefully beginning, but give us a little bit of room would be my suggestion. And then, as far as the evaluations are concerned, I'd like to see if we can't get that done in the first fiscal quarter, which would put us out into the end of October. It would be the first fiscal quarter end, would that be right?
Right, that would be on September 30th.
Right, so.
Evaluations concerning which item?
Just talking about the discussion we would have about how we're going to do evaluations, kind of what we talked about beforehand, coming from that September 16th goal meeting that we had, and how are we helping that individual get to that next level. And it may be a couple work session. Maybe it's one that happens in the next couple months and says, okay, council, what are you looking for? Why do we have such an interest? What are the pitfalls you see? And then we can draft a policy around the concerns that we have, would be my suggestion. But I don't know if those timelines are amenable to everyone and feel like those are attainable timelines.
Yeah, I do. I actually think those are attainable for sure.
We had Derek had his hand up. Sorry, the mayor just walked in.
I don't know exactly what my question is, but just a thought as you talk about, is it 3% cap or how does it work? We do have employees that are above average, and I think historically meets expectation has been the 3.0 or the 3%. So if you have two employees, you have like a 4.0 and a 3.5. Would the 3.5 be a 2%? Are we just kind of changing the scale of how we administer that?
I think that's something we need to have a discussion on. That's what kind of measuring everyone with the same stick.
Yeah.
It's not fair when you feel like someone in another department's getting measured by a different stick than you are. And so I think that's the policy we need to address and adopt as a leadership body, is how is that going to be done? And again, how is that going to move them forward? One idea, and I don't mean to take up all the time tonight with it, but I've got a couple different ideas that maybe are different than we've handled in the past to really try to meet that goal of helping someone get to that next step. You know what I mean? So it might look a lot different. I think we have to be open to various ideas and lots of input, and hopefully again with professionals in the industry we can draft a policy. So for this year, I think we're saying let's draft the policy, but we're leaving it up to administration for this year to do it, and then we'll have a policy to base it off for next year.
I
Is
think
that my
David needs to
understanding?
sit down with the department heads and have this discussion and come up with an agreement amongst the department heads.
Okay, thanks. I think that would be my input, is to be able to administer it so we can explain it to employees so it makes sense of how it's happening through David, so.
All right, thank you, Derek. Any other questions on the budget?
You know, I really appreciate the heavy lifting. I mean, Kyle, you came in. That's a pretty rough time. And David, others, I know you guys have been here till 10 o'clock at night and beyond. You're here on Friday. You're here on, who knows? I probably had to check on Sundays. So I just can't say thank you enough for coming in at the 11th hour and getting this through, and with help of David and Camden and administrative staff. They have done something incredible here. I know I hope it'll get easier next year, but I know we're going to have more time. You'll have a year under your belt, but
Right.
you've come in like you are a pro. Of course, we hired the pro, so let's take that as a compliment. So thank
Thank
you to all you guys that have just and girls that have just done so much work to get this today where it is.
I'll second that one.
Is there a motion to approve the 2018 budget?
I'll take a stab at it. I'll make a motion that we approve the 2018 the American Fork budget fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018, and file the appropriate reports with the state of Utah. And I don't think I need to include anything else as far as timelines, and I'm hoping we can go off that relationship of trust, that we'll be able to meet those, and that we have a good understanding here of what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay.
I'll second it, Mayor.
I have a motion by Councilman Shelton and a second by Councilman Shorter regarding the budget. Move to approve a resolution adopting the American Fork City budget for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018, and the filing of the appropriate reports with the state of Utah. Our budget has to be in the state's hands by Friday.
Correct.
If not, Kyle will get a 2% raise. I'm just kidding.
You'd file that electronically.
I have a motion and a second. I will call for a voice vote on the budget. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We will stand as adopted. We'll move on to item number 2, review and action on a resolution setting the certified tax rate for fiscal year ending 30 June of 2018. This is a certified tax rate we got from the county. Trevor already let the cat out of the bag and told you it was going down. I've asked him to prepare a little slideshow and let you know what this means to the average homeowner in American Fork City. And I was surprised to find that I'm not the average homeowner. I'm on the low end of things.
Thank you, Mayor.
Put your hand around.
First, I just really want to briefly just do a refresher, especially for the people that are here that might not know what exactly is the certified tax rate. You hear this terminology thrown around. It's always good to just get a refresher on what it is. So the certified tax rate, simply put, is the rate that provides the same amount of revenue the entity receives the prior year, excluding new growth. So it's the same amount plus any new growth the city experiences during the year. The rate is, as the mayor pointed out, is set by the county auditor. The only part that we actually get to set of that is, since we have general obligation bonds, we can set how much of the levy is going to be devoted to those GO bonds, which we put in $245,000, which is significantly less than our outstanding general obligation debt. If an entity needs greater revenues than is provided by that certified rate, they go through a process called Truth in Taxation. I'm sure all of you around August see it in the newspaper, because the newspapers will pick up entities that are trying to raise their rates. There is specific steps set forward by the state to go through, which does include notification and a public hearing. One note I always like to mention on property taxes, it doesn't include any inflationary measures. Since we're getting the same amount plus new growth, it doesn't take into account inflation that's occurring, and we have to find other revenue sources to cover that. Fortunate for us, American Fork has a good sales tax base, and a lot of times sales tax is providing that gap where the inflation is occurring. If you have a lot of time on your hands, you can go to this website that the state has, taxrates.utah.gov. You can see our tax rates. You can also see tax rates of any other entity in the state, and you don't even need to register. You can just log in as a guest, and it's all right there. Overall, our certified tax rate, as previously mentioned, has gone down, the rate itself, so it's 0.002082. Last year's was 0.002261. And as previously mentioned, 156,000 of that, we did see an increase in our budgeted revenue, and that's due to new growth. And then there's the breakdown of the rate again. Historically, as you can see, our tax rate has gone down. I pulled the last 6 years. It's gone down. That's because valuations have gone up. The values of properties within American Fork have gone up, which pushes the rate down. This is the resident effect. So this is according to Google what the average home value in American Fork is, $250,600. As you can see, last year, and this is on average, of course, the American Fork portion of the property tax was $311.63. This year it's $286.96. So the city is still receiving the same amount of revenue. It's important to note that, but because valuations are going up, the rate goes down. And this calculation doesn't take into effect what's happening with individual homes. Individual homes are also rising in value, but the way they rise can be different depending on the area. So it's hard to just say, oh, all homes are rising 3 or 5%, because it really can depend on the pocket. And that was my quick presentation. Does anyone have any questions on how the certified tax rate's calculated or how our rate's calculated?
Just real quick, if you go back to that last slide, and you can see it's a sliding scale, so the average homeowner's paying less and less on their home, right? I mean, by dollar amount,
It's important to note that this is assuming that their property value isn't changing.
right? Well, even with the truth in taxation, that'd be the same thing, right? Because that's what basically, well. it's a
Well,
very
what truth
complicated
in
topic,
taxation
so-
would mean is the city would be able to gain more revenue,
Right,
so the tax rate would go up. It would depend on how much the entity asked for. If we asked for $3 million, for example, and double our tax revenue, certainly an average resident would see that
there's
go up.
various variables in there, but I guess if we look at the variables on the trend that we have been going, you've got good, strong growth. And because of that growth and because of property values going up, people are paying less in taxes.
And it's also important to note, this is looking just at the American Fork portion. It's not looking at the county.
Right.
The school district is probably taking up half of the tax bill. There's other entities involved.
Guess what I'm getting at is at some point, we've had this discussion before, we have to take a look at it, and at what point do we have to try to keep up with inflation with small amounts of property tax increase? So
You're
we're
correct,
not looking
yes.
at anything now, and if you go back to your pie chart from previous, where we had, so much coming from sales tax, we got to try to balance that out. So, not that I'm calling for, well, I guess in a way I am. I mean, we need to take a look at it and say, okay, people are saving money on taxes. When's the right time to get that next bump up to help us out down the road? But just something to think of over the next year, I guess.
It is, you're correct. If you get the pie chart too out of skew and you're relying too much on sales tax, when we do see a downfall, I consider sales tax a more volatile source of revenue because when the economy goes down, sales tax is usually the first thing that goes down, whereas property tax is consistent. So, it's a balancing act on what the correct percentages are, but you're correct.
And you did say when you see a downturn, not if we see one. You said when, so
Correct.
You're predicting a future downturn.
At some point, what goes up must come back down. But you realize as a finance professional, I always have to look at the worst case scenario on things.
But I think that's something that we all need to be aware of, and I'm glad you used that, and that's why I'm stressing it. In addition to what Councilman Shelton has talked about, because they are in balance, and it's our responsibility, all of us, to make sure that this city is financially sound and that it's a fair tax base and all those other things that everybody talks about. So I would kind of second, it wasn't really a motion, but I would second that idea that maybe you two be responsible to make sure that we do look at something during the next year or so.
But
because-
never look at it during a election year.
So we can't start until January.
Do it
Okay.
on an off year.
So we do it in January of next year, and I think we look at it because it will take some time to get it done. It's not something we're going to have one meeting on and be done. So I just think something to keep in our minds that we ought to.
Revenues are an important part of the budget process, and usually that's one of the first things that's discussed. So it's actually already on our radar.
I guess the other way, I mean, you could do it through a property tax increase or a fee, but those are discussions to be able to have, right? Somewhere balancing out that ratio. So, okay,
Right.
thank you.
All right.
Mayor, with that, if there's no other question, I'd move to approve the resolution certifying the certified tax rate at .002082.
Thank you for that motion, Councilman Shorter. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilman Shelton. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. It's unanimous. We will move on to item 3. Review and action on a resolution adopting adjustment to the fiscal year ending June 30 of 2017 budget. This is our current year budget. Kyle has looked at the different areas that we have background in and is prepared to make some recommendations for some adjustments.
Thank you, Mayor. As you noticed, there were a lot of adjustments. Going forward, I'm hoping to do these budget amendments quarterly instead of waiting for so long because there's a lot to go through. So The majority of them are just rebalancing line items. For example, a department might spend a little bit more in one line item and have a excess in another, and we'll do a budget amendment to shore those line items up. This presentation will just go through some of the anomalies that are occurring, or not anomalies, but some more significant adjustments. So overall, what my philosophy was, I did want to try to get revenues as close as possible to what we will project to see at the end of the year. So we're going to see quite a number of revenue adjustments. However, on the expenditure side, we're required by state law to not overspend. So I don't want to constrain the expenditures too much that we are put in a situation where there's an anticipated expenditure and we over budget and we get an audit finding, or we get a finding from the state. With that being said, once I looked at the budget, the revenues, I'm anticipating of the 1.7 million of fund balance we allocated to last year's budget, we will be budgeting to return 511,000. In addition to that, there'll be the savings from the departments not spending their budget. That I don't have a number for yet, so we'll know that probably around September, October, when I have the fiscal year closed out. There was some items that were budgeted as revenues that shouldn't have been, so I've reduced those by 85,000. As you're all aware, building development revenue has been strong in this city, so I increased the building permit revenue about 329,000. And then also, in addition to what we had budgeted for sales tax, I think we'll bring in another 200,000 in addition to what was budgeted last year. On the expenditure side, they're relatively flat. One of the major adjustments was an additional 100,000 to cover criminal attorney expenditures, an engineering increase of a little over 99,000, and that's due to plan reviews and professional services that needed to be done to keep up with the demand that's been occurring in the engineering department. The streets is seeing an expenditure increase of 31,800. And mainly that's due to the way the accounting was done before I started for the street lights. Going forward, there won't be an issue with the budget. We ended up having to expense some things due to the way the accounting was done.
And that's just more administrative. I mean, that's not saying it's going to be increased. As you said, going
That's
forward,
correct. It
we're
really
still
was
seeing-
just to clean it up
and we're
and get it
still
caught
seeing
up.
significant savings from the street department, from that street light maintenance that we purchased.
Absolutely, yes. And then going also in addition to that, as you know, next year phase 1 of the LED conversion is budgeted, and that will also save additional money. In the fire and ambulance and police department, dispatch expense was moved by the prior finance director into non-departmental. The city administrator and I felt that really should be with the department because it's truly an expense for the department, and we want to show the true cost of what it takes to operate the department. So that's moving it back. That's was a significant increase in the police department, but really it's just shifting the budget from one area to another. It's not adding an expense. And my philosophy is I try to move expenditures around to cover itself and not have to use additional revenue to cover those. For the fitness center and park tax fund, there was a small revenue expenditure increase for the fitness center. The reason for that increase was the credit card processing fees weren't budgeted for the fitness center, so they overran that line item, but business passes were more than anticipated, so we were able to cover it with that revenue. And then the park tax, which is very similar to the budget you just approved in 2018, a budget amendment's being done to actually move the awards to the correct line items that actually were awarded funds. We had some that were paid out in July, but the budget amendment hadn't been done yet. But that's once again just shifting expenditures around. In the celebration committee fund, we did do a budget amendment to align the actual and projected costs. There was a few major adjustments. Most of them are minor. One was for the Still Days magazine. One was for the city float, which originally was budgeted in fiscal year 18, but it was done in 2017, so it was just a timing difference. And then concerts in the park. And then there was a minor correction to principal and debt service fund due to the incorrect amount being budgeted for the general obligation police bond.
Just to clarify on that celebration fund, we are now going to be able to pre-expense items So, for instance, stuff being bought today for steel days will be hitting the 2018 budget going forward. Is that the right accounting I understand? That we're putting in
It
place?
also depends, you're correct. It also depends on what was purchased. For example, if they bought something from a store and they actually received the product, it does have to go in the period it was purchased in. But for the tents we're renting, for example, since that's going to occur in July, that can be moved to July. What I also was planning on doing at the end of the season was do an accounting that crosses the fiscal year, so you get a more accurate picture of what the actual costs are. Because I know it's a little confusing where it's crossing fiscal years. But you're correct. We're trying to move as much as we can to when the event actually occurs. On the impact fee funds, I did go through and propose budget amendments to more accurately show what we're expecting to receive by the end of the fiscal year. The majority of that fund balance is going to carry forward. We're waiting, of course, for the IFFP, the Impact Fee Facilities Plan, to be adopted before we start budgeting those projects. So it'll just be sitting in fund balance to be used on those projects. On the utility funds, which is your water, sewer, stormwater funds, I'm not sure why, but one of our debt service payments for the GO 2015 bond wasn't budgeted, so I added the budget. And then the storm drain fee was budgeted in 2017, 44% higher than the prior year. So I did have to decrease the budget to bring it in line with actual revenue. And then I did adjust the broadband fund to show that we weren't selling those capital assets. And that's all I have. Do you have any questions on the amendments or any comments?
I'll make a motion to approve the budget amendments for fiscal year 2017 as presented.
I have a motion by Councilman Shelton. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilman Barnes. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 4 on our agenda, consideration and action to enter into a closed session to discuss the character of professional competence of individuals, to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation, to discuss the purchase, lease, or sale of real property, or to discuss other items described in Utah State Code 52-4-204 and 52-4-205. Counselor, is there a motion to move to closed session?
Move, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Frost. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Shorter.
We need to specify why we're going into the closed session and where.
Okay.
Because we want to and downstairs.
Good legal terms.
Is that a good enough answer?
Per-
Isn't what he read,
Doesn't that cover the?
that cover it? That's a
All right. Very good. I have a motion and a second. I'll take a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll reconvene downstairs in the workroom in a closed session. We will close this council meeting from that location.